Hey, what is up guys? Tamir is here to talk with you about the amazing Joe Rogan and how he thinks about kids and ADHD. We're going to talk about and more stuff that was done in some of his podcasts. So there's this first clip that I'm going to show you with a little part with a great influencer, the Gabor Mate. He talks about ADHD, about his experience and what exactly ADHD is and what exactly is the problem with today's approach when it comes to medication and stuff. And later we're going to watch another video that Joe spoke with someone that I haven't yet to see, and this one is about how much freedom do you allow to have your child with, and that's a really important topic for a lot of parents. So I believe that this is going to be a very educational video for you as a parent or maybe as a coach that works with kids or a consultant. This is a really important topics that Joe Rogan really knows how to dive in and avoid just skipping the important details that might be offensive to some people. And that's exactly what I love about him, and I love his work because he doesn't care about what people might think of him as a podcaster and just lets his brain to just flow with the thoughts that he might have and the critical thinking that is really important as a caregiver for children. So today let's dive right in to the first clip with the physician Gabor Mate and about what exactly he thinks when it comes to working with kids. So let's go about it. Let's hear about their thoughts about ADHD and what exactly they think there is. So they talk about a certain
I was just watching this very disturbing commercial yesterday with children, and it was talking about ADHD, and it showed a kid that was not paying attention in class, and it showed these kids like playing around and doing things they weren't supposed to.
Not really interesting. I'm just going to skip it. It's about a dad that just basically means take ADHD pills, like I forgot the name, and that can really make you overcome the symptoms and just be a great kid. So I'm going to skip that a bit and let's go over Gabor's explanation about what ADHD is.
My first book on ADHD. It's the American Scattered Minds, depending on which edition you get. And that was after I was diagnosed with it myself in my 50s.
What does it mean?
ADHD?
Yeah, what is it exactly? Is it real?
Oh, it's real.
But what does it mean?
Well,
like if someone has ADHD, it's not like you have herpes, right? Like you can say, oh, you got a disease.
Well,
what is it?
Well, that's the whole point, is that the medical profession and a lot of the so-called experts think about it as a disease. Another one of these inherited diseases. In fact, they say it's the most heritable mental illness there is. And I say it's neither an illness nor is it heritable.
I'm just going to focus on that. So there is this book that a lot of physicians use, especially people that talk about mental health. It's the DSM, so this is the diagnosis for mental illnesses. That's what it's used to diagnose if someone has mental issues. One of them is ADHD, okay, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And that basically means that you have been diagnosed with a certain level of some symptoms that allows you to either take medicational approach or psychological treatments in order to let's say try to overcome this mental health issue. To call it a disease is something that is not really common. Most people don't call it a disease because it's not something that you get infected by, or I don't believe as well to take medication to just let it go away as if you would do with antibiotics. That's not the definition. So calling it a disease, it's wrong. It's just a mental health problem or deficit. That's what's right to call it. So to call it a disease is wrong. And what he said now, it's not being inheritable and not being I forgot what the other one was. Well, it's not really true to say that. It can be. We don't know, right? Science always learns new stuff, and it's always with hypothesis. So you can't take a claim and say it's not inheritable. I mean, there is probably a genetical component to make people more common with ADHD symptoms. So that might be something, right? So you can see that. But it can also be very, you know, conditional. You learn that with time. So you've been experienced to certain stuff, like he's going to talk with us now. But don't take the initial approach that it is a disease. It's not a disease. And having ADHD is not that terrible, or you can't handle it. I have a lot of friends that has ADHD. I may have an ADD. I've never been diagnosed, but that doesn't really matter, because if you can continue to contribute to society, what the hell does it matter if you have ADHD or not? Maybe if it bothers you and you have real issues, you should go and consult with a professional to check. Maybe you should take medicine or to do something with it, like therapy. So think about that as well. So let's keep watch what he's saying now. I'm wondering what was after that.
So the hallmark are difficulty paying attention when you're not motivated.
Yeah.
So kind of tuning out, like that kid in the commercial.
Like me.
Okay. Poor impulse control, so that you tend to act out whatever emotion arises.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the hyperactivity, difficulty sitting still and then to fidget and all that. And that described me to a T.
So we talked about the different symptoms that you have as ADHD. There are a few more, but basically it makes you having difficulty with attention. So let's keep on.
As soon as I learned about the diagnosis, I knew something. This is not a disease, and it's not heritable, despite the fact that some of my kids were diagnosed with. What is it? So tuning out is not a disease. So let me ask you a question, if I may.
Okay.
Before the question, tuning out, what he means is that you just black out from the moment, or maybe more precisely to let go of the situation and you know, go to your own world in your head. I don't think that's something that you can just generalize to all ADHD issues, right? It can be that you might experience some other form of behavior, especially in kids. So kids might have the tendency to go to violence, or maybe the tendency to start doing a mess and being a bad child, right? And bad behavior. So what exactly is the right way to diagnose it? Yes, there is this specific set of rules to diagnose if there is ADHD or not, but that doesn't really matter, right? What really matters is, for us now, at least in that talk, is a ADHD a disease? I also agree it's not a disease. It's a mental health issue that is sometimes very, very extreme and dangerous to have, or at least not to take care of with kids. But what I think it really means when he says it's not a disease and it's not inheritable, that it's something that is more social learning, social conditioning. And that's exactly what he's talking about now.
If I were to stress you right now, create stress, emotional difficulty or tension for you right now, what would be your options of dealing with that? Of dealing with me? What would be your options?
I could either get upset or I could leave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You could fight back, flight or fight, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But what if you didn't have those options?
Yeah, then you're stuck.
And what does the brain do when you're stuck like that?
It gets distracted.
It gets tunes out.
Yeah, it tunes out. You want to do other things, think about other things.
In other words, it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah, it's normal. I mean, the idea that your child, who is an 8-9-year-old ball of energy filled with, hormones and life and thoughts and things they enjoy, and then you make them sit down all day in this unnatural state in a classroom with fluorescent lights and stare at a teacher that's unmotivated and underpaid and is teaching something in a very boring and non-entertaining way. Yeah. And that if this kid doesn't lock in like a zombie, we need to medicate them.
Yeah, well,
that's true. I don't agree with the medication route, especially not immediately. Sometimes it's inevitable. So don't think that taking medication, just like I used to think before I learned deeply what that means. I thought that taking medication for ADHD is something that is completely wrong, and it's just being lazy, just like taking diet pills instead of going just on your best healthy lifestyle nutritional plan, right? So that's the same thought I was with, but it's wrong, because taking medication for ADHD sometimes is really crucial. and it can really transform one's ability to overcome ADHD that might have much more difficulties otherwise. So I completely agree, don't go immediately to medication, always try without it. But if there is a certain level, yes, take medication. But the idea, and agree, that you don't need to try even to overcome it with just normal behaviors, and the idea that it might have an influence that the daily life of a child is really boring, especially when they go to school. That's usually when they start taking medication as well. In first grade, second grade, it's so boring compared to what they had in kindergarten, when they could just move freely and do whatever they want. All of a sudden they have to sit down and listen and write and do boring stuff. And if it's engaging, then most ADHD kids will participate. But if it's really boring, can you blame them? I mean, they have a certain capacity for forcing the stimulus and to try to control themselves. But if they go over it, what do you expect? Of course, every kid eventually will die out of boredom, right? Just start snapping. And ADHD diagnosed people might have a higher tendency to do it earlier if not being treated properly. So the idea of coping mechanism for ADHD, I don't know if I can take that jump. So what Gabor says here, I think it might be too much of an analysis on his side. I don't think it's in any sort of form, has it as a science backing for it. It's just his opinion, I believe. Maybe there is, I'm not certain, but what I know, that ADHD usually forms because of continued stimulus, especially when you grow up. So you have overstimulus or understimulus, and you just develop this, let's call it, insufficient way of dealing with the need to move, the need to be attentive, or the need to be able to freely do whatever you want. So that sometimes can happen, and I agree with that. But for a certain degree, I don't believe it's been done because you handle with stress and don't know how to handle it, and it's a coping mechanism. I don't know if I can make that jump that Gabor is doing here. Let's keep watching.
The other part of it is that if you look at my infancy, and it sounds like yours, we spent our first year or two under very difficult circumstances, a lot of stress. Infants can't help but absorb the stress of their parents.
Right.
They can't help it. What does an infant do? Could I have escaped or fought back? Could you have? All we could do is tune out.
Yes.
But when is this tuning out happening? When our brain is being developed.
Right.
And our brain, this is the part that nobody taught me in medical school, but it turns out that brain science now teaches us that the human brain develops under the impact of the environment. So the most salient feature of the environment that shapes the circuits of the human brain is actually the relationship with the parents. And if the parents are present and emotionally attuned and available, the child brains develop properly. But the parents are stressed, the child absorbs the stress. What can they do with it? They tune out. And that tuning out thing is programmed into the brain, and then 10 years later or 50 years later we say, you got this disease. No, you don't. You've got a coping mechanism.
Okay, let's stop right there, because I agree with Gabor that there's a lot of impact for parents' stress on infants, that they expose them to that, because stress is based on the cortisol, molecule that you can have, that your body has and store when you are stressed. In young children that has high cortisol levels will tend to have some issues with their brain development, because cortisol is something that basically shuts some of the development parts for kids, and high levels of cortisol comes when you have stress. And you can say that what he's talking about as zoning out can be in neuroscience being explained as high cortisol levels that infants mitigate from the surroundings, and then because of the high cortisols they have this malfunctions that eventually become ADHD. Now, I don't know if I can make that claim completely, if it's just that, or if it can be also something that has to do with other factors that you just cannot comprehend in this short video. But generally, I don't believe that this zoning out is the reason ADHD is developed. I can see why maybe general attention disorders can be developed by this habit from young age to zone out when you just can't handle situations. But that's not what ADHD stands for. ADHD is the difficulty to stay attentive, right? And you also have this element of hyperactivity, because then there's no difference between ADHD and ADD according to this explanation. Now, it can be something to do with it, but the hyperactivity part doesn't come here at all. It has no connection here. So you can't say that there is no difference between ADD and ADHD because they are both coming from this zoning out. But I don't think that's the right way to see it. So that's why you should always, when you hear stuff, think in it in a critical way, because you don't know exactly if that's the truth. Okay, and in general, you don't know never what is the truth. You can always try to hypothesize better. So if you hear stuff like that, make sure you don't take it too personally, especially if you were stressed around your kids. That doesn't mean they have ADHD or they will develop ADHD. It just means that you were stressed out around your kids. And there are ways to overcome it, especially if they're still young. Because I have a lot of parents that are having trouble with their child that have a lot of attention disorders with hyperactivity, so ADHD. But it's not necessarily because of that. It can be from other aspects. Sometimes you can't blame the parents as well. It just, I believe it was developed naturally. It doesn't have to be a environmental influenced situation, just like he's explaining now. So don't take the blame on you or on the parent if you're consulting them. Let's see what he has to say.
It's no longer working for you, but it had a function when it first came along. So this whole idea, and by the way, if a family comes to me with their ADHD child, I'll say to them, what you've got here is a very sensitive child.
I agree with that, because hyperactivity and attention disorders usually happens when the daily life are too unstimulations for you. So you want more stimulations, and that's why you go for doing more stuff or shaking your legs or whatever your coping mechanism with the attention disorder is. So I agree with that. Anyway guys, that's it for this video. You can keep watching it and put the link down below. It was a very, very interesting topic that Joe and Gabor talk about. There is a lot to process here and much more to go over the video. Make sure you watch the entire video down below. And if you have any questions, send them down on the comments. I will gladly answer everything. And if you have any more ideas about what I should talk about that has to do with kids and about building confidence and overcoming difficulties, I'm here for you. Just write it down in the comments. Make sure you also subscribe, because you can get more content just like this and more stuff that I'm going to do in the future. Until next time, train hard, train smart, and peace.